Hi, welcome to Deliverance Diaries with Karla. From casting spells to casting out demons. This is going to be a special episode. This episode is going to be my testimony. I'm going to try to tell it in as short of time possible so that you're not stuck listening for hours upon hours. My testimony is very long. There's a lot of things that went on in my life within my testimony, but I do have a book that I'm writing about my testimony that will have stories in there that I don't normally share when I do share my testimony on other platforms. But I thought today, uh, if you've been watching my devotionals on social media or you came over to the podcast Speak Life with Karla, which is my first podcast that I started, I just thought it was time for me to kind of give you the background of where I came from and how I got to where I am today. So I started out in a normal family. I grew up with both of my parents. We were in I would say, middle class family, nice neighborhood, went to nice, public schools. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. So, it wasn't too crazy back then. And, especially to the outside, my family looked very, very put together and very, very normal, like a normal middle class family. But behind that, there were things that weren't normal. And so growing up in organized religion, I grew up as a Jehovah Witness. I was born into it. So my parents were already Jehovah's Witnesses prior to me ever being born. They were Jehovah's Witnesses. I have a sister who's older than me by 6 years. They were Jehovah Witnesses already prior to her being born. That uh, religion is generational in my family. So, on both sides, my mother and my father's side, there are a lot of people who were Jehovah's Witnesses. And it was just kind of a generational thing. So, you're going back to like my grandmother became one, to my mother, to my sister is now one, her daughter is now one. So, it is something that repeats throughout generations. That is one of the things that you are taught is, you're in this religion, you teach and train your kids up in there. Then when they have kids, they do the same thing and it just becomes a generational cycle. Uh, for me, that did not work out well. Um, I always knew in the back of my mind that like something to me was just not right. And I think it really had to do with, um, it had to do with there is a governing body who basically runs this religion and tells them kind of what to think, what to do, how to act, all of that. And there's a lack of relationship with God. It is more like works based and it's more like follow what we tell you to do and you're going to be good. There is no, build a relationship with God outside of that. They have their own books, their own Bible, their own everything. And it is perpetuated like you must follow what we tell you. So for me, growing up at the time, I did not know why. To me, it was off. I just knew that I didn't want to follow it. And I chalked it up to being a teenager that I was just rebelling because of all the restrictions. You can't have boyfriends. You're not supposed to really associate with people outside of the Jehovah Witness religion. I mean, I was able to like play with my neighbors and stuff like that, but like you're not supposed to have like meaningful, lasting relationships. You're not supposed to like go to people's birthday parties. You couldn't celebrate holidays, plain and simple. You couldn't celebrate your birthday. So there was a lot of restriction. And so at the time, I chalked it up to being restricted. But I honestly believe that is not what the case was. At the time, I didn't know. But what was happening is that I was not agreeing with this relationship in my spirit because I knew that there was no God in this relationship. I knew that there was no Jesus and no Holy Spirit behind it. So outside of growing up in that religion, We also had generational witchcraft. So my great grandmother, who was my grandfather, my mother's dad's mother, was a practicing witch. At the time, uh, nobody ever said what she actually was practicing. But later on, when I got saved and I had reached out, through the Holy Spirit and asked him what kind of witchcraft my great grandmother was into, the Holy Spirit revealed it was voodoo. So there's a lot of stories that were told in my family of things that would happen going to her house in Texas, and experiences that people had that freaked them out, that kept them away, like never going back. There were stories growing up of her putting hexes on people, and doing things to people. And it wasn't told in my family as something scary. It was more told like, oh, great grandmother was, she's a witch. She was putting hexes on people. It was just kind of one of those things that was told without any repercussions. Nobody was explaining the spiritual side effects and problems that came with that. So growing up, I was well aware that this was happening. I actually would go with my mom to my aunt's house where my great grandmother was in her 90s at that time lived. And, I would be sitting down, I would hug this lady, I would be sitting there, she would be, asking me, talking, making small talk and just talking to me. And nobody was thinking like this probably isn't a grand idea to be around this woman who, was practicing voodoo. So that's pretty much, how I grew up with her. And I do recall, like when I would go over there, it wasn't until now that that I have Jesus and the Holy Spirit was able to reveal things. But I used to think that she did something to me. And I don't mean like she harmed me physically. What I mean is like I would be sitting there and I felt like she was imparting something over me or speaking, thinking something into me. And so at an early age, I had abilities and things that weren't normal. So, like, I had in the new age, what they call like clairvoyance, clairaudience. I was able to like dream dreams that would come to, true. I was able to, uh, I would get premonitions and warnings, and like I would call my friends and say don't go there because this and this and this is going to happen, something bad, but it wasn't just, oh, don't do this because something bad's going to happen because you're going to a party, you don't know the people and blah blah. No, it was like I was very detailed into what would happen. This was something that I did not allow like anyone really to know. I didn't really talk about it. It was, something that I kept hidden because I knew that it wasn't normal. Like normal kids were not walking around being able to do this. The one thing I do remember that I always tell is the story of, so when I was about, I think around like uh, around 8, I think, my mother got a phone call from my aunt, and my aunt was frantic. And my mom just like quickly ushered me into the car and said, we have to go to my aunt's house. So we end up getting there, and my aunt comes to the door, and she's just like, you could tell she's beside herself. And my mom sits me down in the kitchen and she tells me, stay in this chair, don't get up, don't, meddle around, because my aunt lived in a house, really nice house. She had like these crystal chandeliers. She had these amazing, like really expensive, like antique looking couches, and of course they had the plastic on them. And so she had a really nice house, and my mom was just like, don't meddle around, don't get into stuff, just sit here. Well, of course I'm like 8, so of course I was walking around meddling and stuff, touching the crystal lamps. And then I heard the door open finally. I At 8 years old, I don't know exactly how long that they were in there. It was a long time, so I'm assuming anywhere from like an hour uh, or longer. And so when they come out, I immediately run back into the kitchen, and then I can hear them in the hallway talking really low and just kind of still kind of, you could feel the energy of like, oh my goodness, something had definitely happened. Well, it wasn't until I was Later, a teenager, when my mother told me exactly what had happened that day, and that day my aunt had went in to check on her mother, who was my great grandmother, and when she opened the door, she was levitating off the bed. And she tried to get her down. And mind you, during this time, my grandmother was in some type of trance, sleep, whatever, but she never woke up. My aunt was freaking out because she couldn't get her down. She called my mom. They both went in the room, started praying over her um, and reading the Bible, and that's what brought her back down. Once she got back on the bed, that's when she finally woke up and saw my mom and her daughter in there and was like, "Oh, what happened?" And they were just like, they were trying to explain it to her, but then they were just like, "This is too crazy." So I didn't learn that until after I was a teenager. And so throughout my, you know, little childhood life, adult life, we always heard stories about different things that happened, especially involving and revolving around my great grandmother and her witchcraft. So even though, I had that side and then I had this organized religion side. And so as a child, of course, you have to, uh, I'm obeying my parents. So I'm, going to church and doing the things that my parents are telling me to do. When I got into it as a teenager, like by the time I was like in about seventh, eighth grade, I started to rebel 100%. And then one thing that my parents did not know because I did not reveal it to them until I was well into my 30s was that when I was in high school, I went through a traumatic event where I was sexually assaulted. And so once that happened, I can 100% attest to that opened up very, very extremely bad doors. And one of the things that I want to say is the number one way that Satan gets a foot into your life and a door opens in your life is through trauma. So through that trauma opened up, it would open up into addiction. It would open up into unforgiveness, bitterness, uh, mistrusting of the opposite sex. It opened up pain. Um, it also opened up just a lack of, trust towards a lot of different people, what people, not trusting people's words. And then it brought in promiscuity. And so then I became, I guess it would be like bitterness because I was like, now that I know that all these, this jerk did this to me, this is all that all men want. So I was out to get you before you could get me. That was the mentality that it instilled in me is that everyone's going to hurt you at some point in time. So, um, being that I didn't, a young teenager going into a young adult, it really didn't, the trauma didn't really fester and manifest until later on. It really started to come back. But in the beginning, I didn't tell anyone. I pushed it down and kind of out of sight, out of mind. And you're not taught as a teenager or a child that like, pushing that down eventually it's going to blow up. So I was thought I did the right thing by, I'm just not going to think about it. It didn't really happen type thing. And so it didn't even really manifest except for the promiscuity. But like other than that, the addiction and all of that had not kicked in yet. And so it wasn't until later that that really kicked in. And so really growing up, I believed in God all like there was never a time when I didn't. I also did not like blame God for anything that happened in my life. That was never something that crossed my mind to blame him. I always knew that, I was responsible for my actions and choices. So it was never like, God did this. Um, there were times growing up when I kind of blamed my parents, I would say, but never like God. uh, Even though, growing up as a Jehovah Witness, I didn't have a relationship with God. Like I always knew that he was real. Uh, and I knew that, I didn't come from evolution or anything like that. So I never really went down that route. And even I didn't get into like witchcraft until I was into my early 20s. So basically, what led up to it is I got married really young. I had two beautiful children, and I started going to school. I had went back, and I went to college. And at the time, I was in college, and I was um, I was sitting at the mall, waiting for my next class to start and eating lunch. And this was when the first part of, I guess, Satan attacked with the witchcraft introduction. And this woman had walked past me, and she was kind of like had a shawl over like her head kind of wrapped around her, and she was had like a long skirt on, and very fast she set a card down and just kept walking. And literally by the time I had turned around to see who had placed the card, she was clear down like the path. And so basically, I picked up the card. I remember looking at it, and it said like she was some type of, it did not say like she was a witch or anything like that. It said like she was some type of healer or something. And so I remember calling her later, like days later, and, her inviting me over to talk. And she was like, I have to, talk to you. I have to tell you something. So I remember going to her house. I will say this, like there was nothing in there that was, that looked like witchcraft. There was nothing in there that would have triggered me. Like there was like a few things in my life that I never messed with. One was a Ouija board. I just knew never to touch that mess. And so if she would have had something like that, I would have turned around and left. So it wasn't anything like that. It was like normal house, normal apartment, except for the only thing I remember is that in this hall closet, when you first walked in, she had like shelves and, uh, or it was not really like shelves. So more like one of those metal, like baker's rack type things. And it was what there was white candles lined up and they were all just lit. I do remember that, but other than that, there was nothing that stood out. And so I sat with her. She told me basically that there was a hex over me and my family. And it literally triggered me because knowing that my great grandmother was out there putting hexes on people, I figured, oh, she probably hexed someone who got mad and then hexed her back. So it seemed logical to me at the time. So she basically said, I can remove this hex off of you, off of your family. And the way that whenever you're dealing with people dealing, who are in witchcraft and stuff like that, it's always on a they always come to you with an emergency. So it's with an urgency that they're telling you like this is what's happening, and if you don't get this off and it continues to happen, it's going to stop you from ever being successful. It's going to stop you from ever having money. It's going to stop you, but it's always with a sense of urgency, and that's how they manipulate you, is because it's always like a life or death type thing. Like you got to do this. So, of course, I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to do this. And so she basically gives me these bath salts, and she writes out the directions. And it's basically like on a full moon at this time, you take a bath. It was like a cleansing spell. You take the bath with the salt waters and you speak an incantation, is basically what it was. So of course I paid her the money because of course it's never free. I paid her the money. I went home and I literally did this. Nothing happened nothing happened like like in that moment. And then what happened was later, she reached out to me and then she's like, oh, I'm still seeing, this dark energy on you. So we still have to do this and this and this. Well, I think I did one more thing maybe. And then it was always something else, this, we have to go deeper. We have to do this. And I got to the point where like, lady, and it wasn't cheap. It was like pretty expensive. So I'm just like, I'm done. I'm not going to keep forking out money. And so I kindly just told her like, you know what? You said you were going to be able to do this in one shot. You didn't do it. I'm over it. And after that, I had went to talk to her one more time and I forgot why. But when I went back, apartment completely empty. Uh everything, like her phone number disconnected. That was why I went back, because I went to call her to tell her that the last thing she had did not work. I was like, once again, I don't see a difference or whatever. And so when I called, I got the do do, they're not, this number's been disconnected. So I thought, I'm going to drive to her house and tell her, or talk to her, have my words with her. When I showed up, apartment completely empty. They were redoing it so that the next tenant could come in. And so that's how I knew it was completely empty, is because they were like in there painting and stuff. And I'm like, this lady literally was just there. So um, I ended up, being like, whatever. And I kind of just left it alone. I never, dabbled anymore. And then fast forward a few years later, and I had ended up going back to Portland. Me and my husband at the time ended up getting a divorce. And so I was living in Portland again. And I was an avid reader. I loved to read. And so I went to Barnes and Nobles one day to grab books. And as I was grabbing these books that I was reading, I ended up going down this one random aisle. And I got to the aisle I was looking, and I realized it was a witchcraft section. Well, in that section, I started like looking at the books, and a couple of them caught my eye, and I ended up buying them. And so I went home that night to my apartment, and I started looking through the books. And one of the books was like the type of spell book where it had a lot of things that you would need to gather. Like it was like, get a cauldron and do all this stuff, which I was like, I don't know where I would get a cauldron from. Like, I don't know where I would buy these things from. So I'm literally not going to be able to do these. And I didn't know about, like, now you see them on the street corners everywhere, the bodegas where you can go in and buy all the stuff for witchcraft. And so basically, I ended up looking at a different book. And this book basically was really simple. And I found this one simple, uh, it was like a love spell. And so I had decided that I was going to try it. And I thought, it was out of more curiosity. So I wasn't operating like, oh, I'm going to do this. Like, this is what I want to do. This was more out of being curious. And like that saying, curiosity killed the cat. Basically, that's what it was. And so I decided that I was going to perform this love spell. It 100% worked. But one thing that I want to explain to people when you're messing with this type of stuff, people don't realize that when you're messing with witchcraft and things like that, you are manipulating free will, the same free will that God has given us all to make that choice, whether we want to invite Jesus into our life or not. You are manipulating that same free will. Witchcraft is nothing but manipulation. You are manipulating people, you're manipulating circumstances, you're manipulating choices, you're manipulating God's way, you're manipulating things in order to benefit you or someone else. And so basically, it worked 100%. But the other thing that I want to explain too with love spells is that you're manipulating a person. So you think it's harmless, but what you're doing is you are binding that person both on the physical realm and in the spiritual realm. And what happens is let's say you get tired of that person and you no longer want to deal with them. Well, it's not as easy as you think to break off with them, because you have bound yourself to this person. You have soul tied yourself. So, like, even if you want to leave, this person won't leave you alone. And you're like, go away. I don't want you anymore. It doesn't matter. You bound yourself to this person. You have manipulated this person's will, this person's emotions, this person's feelings, this person's thoughts. So now they are locked into you. So that's the dangerous part, is that and people don't explain that. You're never going to do or go to somebody and they're never going to tell you, oh, and by the way, this love spell is going to do this and this and this to you. No, they're just going to tell you it's going to work and you're going to get the person of your dreams until you don't want them. And then now you're stuck because you can't get rid of them. And it takes a lot to break off that uh witchcraft that you have put on that person. And so I did do it. Yes, 100% it worked. And right at that moment was when Satan basically got me hook, line, and sinker, because that's when I realized, oh, I have power. And if you didn't catch it, it wasn't, oh, I can do good things. No, it's I have power to control things, people, whatever. And that's exactly how he got me. And from there, I did not, I didn't buy any more books. I didn't do anything like that. Once I did the first spell, it was like I gave Satan rights to just download information into me. So he just started downloading, like, this is how you can, this is the type of magic you can operate with. This is the type of witchcraft you can operate with. And he started showing me, like, this is where you're going to be powerful in. And so I moved out of uh what I had started in and started doing what's called candle magic. And then he taught me like sex magic and a lot of other different things. And I want to also say that there is no such thing as a good witch. So I don't care. I've heard people say, I'm a good witch. There's black magic, and people will say there's white magic. There's just magic. There's just straight demonic power. It isn't, there is nothing, there's no good and there's no bad. It is all bad. It's all bad. And I don't care. I know that they have like a bazillion, there's green magic and this magic and all these colors. Yeah, that's no, no. It's just plain straight across bad magic. It is satanic. But you'll operate under, I'm doing, I'm only doing this for good. But that's not even true, because what happens is once you have the abilities to do this stuff, you might mean well. And I did. Like, I wasn't outwardly intentionally harming people. I didn't practice, dark magic, and purposely want to bring, people down in their lives or something. But I will say this: when somebody made me angry, where most people would get mad, cuss, a person out, threaten to beat them up or anything like that, I never did that. I would go silent and turn around, and then I would do magic on you. I would sit there and do a spell, and I would basically speak over what I wanted to happen to you. And then I would sit back and do nothing, and it would happen, because that's what happens. Like, if you don't understand, like, casting spells on people, putting hexes on people, this is all 100% real. And the reason why is it's based on the principles of God. Like, you have the power to speak life and death. God tells you this in the Bible. You can speak life over yourself and speak life into others, or you can literally speak things over people and harm them. That's exactly what you're doing with witchcraft, is you're manipulating the situation instead of, and taking away free will, and then you're speaking whatever you want to happen. This goes hand in hand with manifestation, highly demonic as well. People think that oh no, it's not, it's just, it's demonic. Manifestation, trying to manifest things, it is witchcraft as well. So basically, once this door was opened, I operated in witchcraft throughout my entire rest of my life. uh and I do want to speak on something else, is that one thing that people do not they're not aware of, is that with everything that Satan gives you, that can be women, men, sex, love, it can be money, fame, notoriety, whatever he is giving you, power for to cast spells and for it to work. Whatever he's giving you, he's going to suck the life out of you in return. So for every spell that he gave me, there was something he gave me. More trauma. He gave me addiction. He gave me, you name it. Like, you can see it. Like, especially, like, even when I'm wishing this harm on other people. And I've watched people, the people that I did this to, I watched their lives fall apart, literally. So it does 100% work. And I have repented and, did all of that once I became a Christian. But in return, my life was going, like, things were happening that were chaotic in my life as well. uh and then there's another side, that if you do this to somebody who's a Christian or somebody who knows what you're doing, they can bounce it back to you and it will cause harm on you. Luckily for me, I was never going against anyone who knew of God. Those weren't the people that I were around. So when I was doing this to someone, it never did come back on me. But it didn't matter because Satan was already sucking things from me. Like, he was draining my life literally out of me. And so, because operating in this, I was operating like I was in and out of relationships, like, no matter how hard I tried, eventually it would just turn into chaos. And so throughout my 20s into my 30s, also I was like really big in like going out and, you know, going out on the weekends and going clubbing and stuff. So I was living that lifestyle as well. Like, outside of like when I didn't have my kids, I would be doing partying. And then basically fast forward and we get into my late 30s, and that was just when I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I really want to do something different with my life. And so that's really when, once again, I'm trying to do something better, like improve my life. I want to be a better person. And, this is not the time that I can say, like, Jesus showed up. It definitely was not. Satan was like, oh, okay, let me show you a different avenue. And that's basically when um he brought in new age, but the new age that I fell into was more under the guise of self-help. So I was completely on this mission of like, practicing gratitude and changing how using affirmations and changing how you look at yourself and rewiring your brain. And so I put down the, witchcraft to an extent and picked up this new transformation. And I remember I was working like downtown in Portland, Oregon, and I walked one day by this. It was a crystal shop, but it wasn't like a new agey looking crystal shop. It was like a actual rock store. But then they had little sprinkles of new age stuff in there. And I remember going up to this table because they had like big, huge rocks that were amethyst, like cut in half, and they were super expensive. And so I was like, oh, this stuff is pretty expensive. And they had all these different, like, beautiful rocks that are very, hard to get. And I remember they had a table, and this table was like rocks and bags, and they were, like $5, $10 each. And it was like protection rock crystals and crystals for this. And they had all these crystals. And I remember buying, I don't even know how many bags. And I took them home, and that became the store that I would stop at on my way home from work all the time. And I started to have a collection of crystals. And then from there, I ended up putting the crystals all around my house. So around the tops of my walls, and then around my door jambs. And that was kind of the doorway that got me in there. And then I don't even remember how I found this or where I came across this flyer, but basically there was a flyer for a metaphysical fair. And I ended up going. At the time, I was dating a guy who grew up with his grandmother being like his mother figure, and she was into the metaphysical and also, would get premonitions and was, kind of psychic, or was psychic. So he was very okay with this stuff. And so we ended up going together to this metaphysical fair. And this is when I was introduced to like shamanism. I was introduced to the, tarot card readers and psychics and all these different things. And so I had sat with a shaman, and he was talking to me about more about my generational bloodline and stuff. And then I went in to talk to this in to have this girl read my tarot cards. And when she did, like, she was horrible and she wasn't good at it, and nothing she was saying was even like making sense. And I just was like, yeah, in my head I'm just thinking like, yeah, you suck, you don't have no gift, like you're just doing this, but you don't really know what you're doing. And next to her was like this guy who was psychic. And I thought, okay, let me see what he's going to say. And when I sat down, this was definitely who Satan had decided to use. And so he just starts telling me things that I know nobody else would know. And as he gets done getting ready to, with the, wrapping up the reading, he says, I have a message. You are an open channel. He said, you have so many different gifts and abilities. You need to start going home and researching your clairvoyance, your clairaudience. And he listed off all these different gifts that I had. And of course, hook, line, and sinker, you're going to take it because it goes into, the ego, and you're like, "Oh, I am super important. I have all these gifts." Like, yes. So I immediately started going home and practicing, developing, and like I got into like channeling, which is basically where you do meditation until you empty yourself out of no thoughts, and then you allow uh the the entities, the demons, the entities will call themselves like names. To They will say that they are your higher self. You do not have a higher self. What you have is a familiar spirit, a demon that's attached to you and your bloodline, but you do not have a higher self. That's not a real thing. But they'll go tell you they're your higher self. They will tell you that they can tell you that they're aliens. They will tell you whatever they need to tell you in order for you to believe. And so I would get different entities, speaking to me through me. And then I started doing automatic writing, which is basically the same concept. You have to empty yourself out, and then basically this entity moves in and actually writes through you. So they're using your hand and stuff. And the one thing that I can say is like the handwriting will be different. The style of writing isn't normal. What they're telling you is not something like, especially when I was doing it, I knew that it was not me, because it would be the messages would be something that I had never thought about, wasn't ever going to think about. And so I knew that something was coming in. Throughout this time when I got into the new age, like I went very like all the way head first, and I just went down multiple rabbit holes. And I, started studying the chakras, learning how to balance the chakras, eat for the chakras. I started teaching classes on this. I started, having like Facebook groups, and I would, teach and make videos, and I started uploading them on YouTube. And then I ended up finding out, about Reiki healing. And so that was my next thing. So I became a Reiki healer. I um, completed the first stages, 1 and 2, and then I was getting ready to train as a Reiki master. And I just want to say everything that I'm talking about is all Satan's doing. None of this is from God. Reiki healing is not from God. It is, you are, Satan lies under the guise that this is a healing practice. It is not. When you have to go in for the training, you literally go into this trance like meditation. And through the person who's training you and these recordings, you are allowing demons to enter into you. Not to mention, in order to call this healing power, you have to draw sigils. And so you were, one of the things that we had to do the first day of the training is she gave us what the sigils look like on paper, and we had to go home and learn to draw these sigils. Part of it was you could draw the sigils like with inside your palms, and literally I would feel my whole hands activate with energy. But mind you, you are using demonic power. This is not from God. And one thing I want to say is like, God, any gift from God, you're never going to have to do some type of ritualistic thing. Like I can hear from the Holy Spirit. I don't have to go meditate or turn around 5 times or draw a sigil or do anything. Like if he has something to say, he's going to put it like, I'm just going to know. And so that's the difference, is that when you're dealing with Satan, there's always like some type of craziness that has to happen, some type of process. It's always a process, or you have to open your mind, you have to clear your mind, you have to, you might have to take psychedelics so you can go into the spirit realm. There's always something that you have to do when you're dealing with the gifts of Satan. When you're dealing with the gifts that God gives you, there's nothing that comes with them. He's just going to give them to you, or you already have them, and you just have to learn how to stop and listen for God's instruction. So, mind you, I am now deep into the new age, and I am doing the most. And of course, in the new age, I started having crazy experiences like astral projecting. I had an experience where my grandmother appeared to me in some type of dark void, and I was literally able to tangibly like touch her, feel her. It was very crazy. Later on, when I got saved, obviously that was a familiar spirit. I was told by an entity that I was Isis reincarnated. It led me to get a tattoo on me of the Eye of Horus, because I was going back to, who I was. And one night I woke up in a manifestation of Ra, from the Egyptian sun god, was standing in my room with the headdress, like, and a spear, dressed like you see in the books, in my room. And I thought I was like, I thought I was hallucinating, but then I realized I am wide awake. Not to mention, I got into like listening to frequencies, and I would listen to them in my sleep. And I started having problems like being able to go to sleep, because what would happen is I would close my eyes, and instead of falling asleep, I would go into the spirit realm, and I would be like in there, like, where am I and why am I seeing people and things? And I could see like, it literally looks like another city. And I was just like seeing buildings and storefronts, and I'm like, where am I? But I knew I was not sleeping. There were times when something would try to jump out at me when that would happen, and it would like literally spook me. So, I was starting to like smoke weed before I went to bed so I could fall asleep, or make sure that I had drank alcohol before I went to sleep so that it would help me to just go to sleep and I could bypass having to go into the spirit realm and all of that. And then there was the worst thing that happened was when I started getting into the Kundalini side of things, and I started looking up like Kundalini yoga, Kundalini spirit, or the Kundalini method, not the spirit, and what it did. And I decided that I wanted to do that because, with under the guise of you're going to reach the full enlightenment. You're going to go from 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D to the next, the highest dimensions, and you're going to be full of knowledge. The same lie that was told in the Garden of Eden is the same lie Satan is still using. It never changes. So I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to go, I'm going to be this super smart, person with wisdom and knowledge and all of this. And I started messing with that. And I kid you not, that was the worst experience I ever had, because I remember after I'd started awakening these snakes at the base of your back. The concept is that there's these snakes, and as you awaken the Kundalini, they travel up your spine and out through the top of your head. And when they get to there, that's when you have the ultimate, knowledge or whatever. Well, when I started awakening them, I got to the point where would be sitting at work, and I could hear 1,000, I swear, 1,000 voices, like nonstop chatter, just like talking, but not talking to the point where you can make it out. And you're hearing like conversations and you can literally tell the difference. It was like just chatter. And it literally almost drove me crazy. Like I couldn't function at work. I could not think my own thoughts through this chatter. Um, it got really bad. And so I immediately tried to look it up, like what I was experiencing. And of course, in the new age, they lie and they'll tell you, like, oh, this is normal. You're just experiencing this. And so that's what I was told, but it got worse and worse to the point where I was like, you know what? I'm over it and I'm done. And so I just stopped. And I did not go any further with it. And I just couldn't do it. I was like, it was driving me mad. And so basically after that, uh, I kind of went into the alien side of things in the new age, and I just couldn't get down with like Mother Earth. I couldn't get down with like, God was a woman. I couldn't get down with the alien, aliens were like gods and stuff. I did believe that they were legit, like real, but I didn't really believe in the Galactic Federation and the Pleiades and we're coming back to save us and all of this. And so, even though I was in the new age and all of this, I still, in the back of my mind, believed in God. And I was like, you cannot convince me that God is not real because when you look at how our bodies operate, like when you look at the intricate details of creation, there's no way that this just accidentally happened. And so I just clung to that in the back of my head. Well, one day I was at work and this is where God comes in, and he really used YouTube to bring me to him. And so what happened was is that I usually would only listen to frequencies or secular music. And one day I go to turn on my music, and there's this video that pops up, and it's about aliens. So I turn it on thinking that it's, another video about how the aliens are helping us and who they are or whatever. And in actuality, it was a man, I cannot remember who it was exactly, but he was just talking about how he had done a experiment type study where he was meeting with all the people who had had like alien abductions and interviewing them and asking them, what had happened, and really getting people's thoughts on, was this real? Was this in your head? Like, was it a physical manifestation of what happened? And all of the people he had spoke to said one thing across the board, and they all said the only way that the attacks stopped was when they said the name Jesus. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, what? And then the person who was speaking said, did it ever occur to you that the aliens are demons? And the minute that he said that, it was like my whole world broke in that moment. And instantly I knew like that was the truth. And then as he ended his video, he said, it doesn't matter how you die, whether it's drug addiction, whether it's getting hit by a car, cancer, whatever. Satan just wants you to die without knowing the truth. He wants you to die without knowing who Jesus Christ is. And he wants you to die without knowing the truth. So you end up in hell where he has to spend eternity. His mission is to take as many of us down with him as he can. And immediately when I heard that, I got super upset. I was livid. And right then and there, I made up my mind like, I am not going to willingly walk into hell. Uh, I am going to figure out who this is, why he hates me so much, and how do I get out of this. And I do have to say, prior to this experience, I did have another video that popped up, and it was like on the five, I think it was the five biggest cults, and there was like this lady who had studied cults, and she had like all these degrees, and she was talking about what makes a religion or a cult. And as I was watching this, they're doing, Mormonism and Jonestown and all of this. And then they said the Jehovah Witnesses. And I literally stopped dead in my tracks and just honed in, and they started listing off the reasons why, like the prediction of the end of the world that they did. I think it's like two or three times in like 1914, 1920 something. And I think one more time. And so they just kept saying all these things. And I literally was just like locked in. And I was like really devastated because I was like, growing up in there was always in the back of my mind, like, what if they are onto something? What if this is the true religion? So when I heard that, I'm like, okay, well, if that's not even it, then what is? And instead of Jesus swooping me up right then and there and saying, I'm here, that's not what happened. After I heard that, I heard the show on the aliens being demons, and then I began on a mission to study Satan. And I don't mean reading the Satanic Bible or anything like that. I mean studying like why he hated me, how he operated, how the demons and principalities operated, what he was, what his goal is, what the end game is. And I did this for I don't even know, probably like maybe like around a year. And uh once once I was once I got to the realization that okay, hell is real, Satan is real, and he is out to kill me. And then it was like there's got to be an end game, and now I need to know how to beat him. And that's when Jesus kicked in, and my YouTube, another video pops up. And this time it's a preacher and he has a sermon. And I had never in my life ever used my YouTube for anything that had to do with anything about Jesus or religion or anything. And so curiosity killed the cat, but this time it did not kill me, it changed me. So I clicked on it and I listened to the sermon, and I immediately became like a sponge. And I kept this preacher had like 385 videos. I started listening to sermon after sermon at work, when I was working, on my way home, like during the day, on my weekends, when I'd be cleaning the house. Instead of listening to music, I'm listening to these sermons. And I just started to like really know, like, okay, this is it. Like I'm pretty sure. Now, mind you, Satan now is attacking me left and right. He's causing a lot of distractions. I'm talking about like guys that I used to date years ago, hadn't heard from them, all of a sudden popping up, all of a sudden contacting me, calling me. It was so crazy around me. And at the time, of course, I don't know that this is Satan is attacking me. He's trying to bring back distractions, and he's trying to keep me locked in to what I was doing. And it got to the point where it was so much crazy and chaos that I got to the point where I just remember one night I was, it was on a weekend. I, had came home from work. I remember had been, smoking weed. I had like drank a couple drinks. And I just remember being like, I'm so sick of this. Like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so I remember I got down on the floor in my bedroom in the pitch black dark. It was like midnight. And I just cried out and I just said, Jesus, if you are real, I need you to heal me. I need you to take the addictions. I don't want to smoke anymore. I don't want to drink anymore. And I said, and I want you to heal me all the way, 100% from the trauma, my past, everything. I want it gone. And I said, if you do this for me, I will never turn back, and I will serve you until I die. And then, like, in the new age, you're always supposed to look for symbols, signs, whatever. And so at first I was kind of expecting, like, I don't know, my room to light up, a dove to fly out or somewhere. I don't know, but nothing really happened except for I began to sob. And this sob was like a release that I can never quite explain what it was. It was like every horrible everything just came out of me. It was just, and I just remember it was like buckets of tears pouring out. And then I got up and I went to bed, and it was the best sleep I ever had. And so from then, uh, God just really began to work in my life. And he he used YouTube. So he would bring videos up and I would watch them. And it was like, there was a video, it was the same pastor, and he was talking about, you know, um, opening doors, and, when when you're messing with witchcraft and all of this. And so I knew, oh goodness, I have done a lot. I need to go in and do a deliverance. And so I remember calling around because there wasn't any deliverance ministers in the area where I lived. And so I remember going online and searching, and I came across someone in Florida, and I reached out to them, and I, was talking to them, and they said, of course we can do this. And I was like, do I need to be there? And they're like, no. And so at the end, they're like, well, we do recommend that you make a donation of $467. And I'm like, I just politely said, okay, thank you so much for letting me know. And I literally got off and I screamed in my house, I will not pay for Jesus. And immediately when I said that, I got back on my computer in out of the blue, well, Googling, but I mean, right up pops up this 30-page deliverance, and it is a PDF, and it is the process from when you read through the scriptures, you go through all of, forgiving everybody, to when you go through and start breaking things off. It had, putting on the armor of God, and I printed it out, and I had made a date, and I said, on this day I'm doing this deliverance. And I did the deliverance on myself, went through the entire thing. And the one thing that I did not know that I needed to do was, after I did this deliverance, I did not know, like, you need to read the Bible, you need to be praying, you need to be filling your empty house back up with the word of God. Otherwise, the demons, like in the scripture says, when you clean your house out, they will bring, 7 demons will come back. Well, it was not 7, it was like everybody and their mama showed up. And so I ended up going, and it was kind of funny because as this is happening, I'm like, what is wrong? Why is this happening? Bink. another um another YouTube video pops up, and it is someone explaining how the very thing I just said, how when you do a deliverance, you have to put the word of God back into you. You have to fill yourself up with God. So I said, okay, I'm going to do this again. So I did. And this time I literally, like, stopped listening to secular music. I stopped everything, and I just started pouring the word of God into me. Now, mind you, I did this deliverance, but at the same time, I'm still smoking. I'm still like drinking, but not a lot, like here and there. And I'd really tapered off the drinking, but then Satan sent a situation in that was super traumatic. And I ended up going to the liquor store, even though I hadn't been drinking, and I had definitely stopped drinking liquor. I ended up going to the liquor store. And when I went to the liquor store, it ended up, the whole situation ended up like the police had to be called. I ended up leaving my house for like a week because, like, the police recommended it because of the person. And they were just like, we would recommend you not being there. You never know what people are going to do. So I ended up leaving. Well, that night I had this bottle. I went to my parents' house, and I remember cracking this bottle open. It was like a little bottle, like this big. And I remember getting ready to drink it. And I heard, not audibly from the outside in, but inside, I heard, this is the last drink you will ever take. I drank that little bottle. I have never drank again. And we are going now on 8 years. The same thing with smoking. I got ready to get baptized. I was still smoking. And there was a thought that came into me. And it was such a strong thought that, like, when you get baptized, you die to your own self. This Karla will now be dead. And I knew that when I came out that water, I didn't want any of my old habits on me. And so I'm not going to lie, I used to buy a lot of weed. And I literally remember telling God, like, God, I'm not going to throw this away because this is like $350 for it. I'm going to get rid of it before I get baptized. And so I remember I smoked it all. And, um, and then same thing. It was I had smoked it all before the day of my baptism. I got baptized. And when I did, same thing, never smoked again, 8 years later. So I say this just because sometimes we think that, like, it's not so much what you're going to do, it's what God's going to do. And he knows the exact time and the right moments to break these things off of you and to clean you out and change you. And so you just have to be willing and let him do it at his time. Because if I would have tried to stop, if I would have tried to control it, I would have been down the same path. Because in my whole, life, I have tried many times to just stop doing, stop smoking, stop drinking, stop doing this. And it might work for a while, but then I always came back. And so this time I knew this is God's doing. I need to let him operate and work. I need to let go of control and allow him to do it in his time. And so that's what I did. And so basically from there, I just really, I spent a whole year learning who Jesus was. I became, he was my everything. I secluded myself, and it wasn't, it was more, uh, I think he really wanted that to happen. This doesn't work for everybody, but this is what he chose for me. And I really got to know him and build a relationship with him. And he showed me how to build this relationship and the things that he wanted from me. And then from there, I founded church because it was time and I wanted to be around other people who were like minded. So I found a church, and then I ended up, going in church and I started serving. And, there was times when I thought I was walking in the purpose that he had for me, but really they were training grounds to get me to where he wanted me to go. And so since then, I am doing 2 podcasts. I have written 12 books. I am writing a whole testimony book. Uh, I have developed a discipleship mentor program that is on my website uh, to mentor and train other women and how to build this faith based relationship. I am speaking. I am, it's amazing what God does. And so, the only thing I want to say to anyone out there who is watching and listening is that you are never too broken. You are never too far down. You are never too bad off where you cannot be forgiven. God is not looking at you in the lens of you are a horrible, terrible, disgusting, bad person. He's looking in the lens of as a loving father. This is my child. I want to heal my child. I want to show my child love. I want to pick my child up out of their mess, dust them off, hold them and wrap them in my love, and then show them a better way. That is how God sees you. So you are never too far gone, no matter what you've done in your life, no matter the mistakes you've done, it doesn't matter. When God comes and picks you up out of your mess, he forgets your past. It's not him who brings up the past and gives you the shame. That is from Satan, and it's from the pits of hell. So to anyone who's out there watching, no matter what you're going through, addiction, you've dabbled in witchcraft, prostitution, whatever it is, gang banging, it doesn't matter. He still wants you and he's calling you home. All you have to do is be willing and open and say even the most simplest sentence: Jesus, I accept you into my life. I want to know you. Reveal yourself to me. Teach me who you are. Just that alone will allow God to operate in your life and to reveal himself to you slowly. So, this is just a short, like, it's a condensed version of my testimony. And throughout the Deliverance Diaries, I will share stories that I did not share today. Really, if I was to do my testimony, it would be, you know, probably hours and hours and hours. And so I'm just uh, using bits and pieces that this Holy Spirit guides me to reveal. So I hope, this gave you some light into where I came from, who I am, and why I decided to make these podcasts and, speak out and share my testimony. So until the next episode, I hope you guys have an amazing, amazing day or evening, and I'll see you next episode.